feeling like a total dork right now because I think I'm one of the few people who actually use the template for the slides. But I think it's pretty nice. My name is Emily Stolfo. I'm an adjunct faculty at Columbia University, and I work on the Ruby driver at 10gen, the Ruby driver to MongoDB. I'm not going to talk about MongoDB today, but I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. I'm going to focus more on my night job of working at Columbia in the computer science department, teaching Ruby on Rails, and having been an undergraduate there not too long ago, working as a professional, and then coming back as both a professional and an educator, and reflecting on some of the things that I've learned only on the job. So I want to start out with a problem that I've identified that I didn't really learn how to program until I was ironically doing an internship in the context of a master's at the Louvre in Paris. And I have a CS degree. I studied computer science at Columbia University. So I want to talk about this problem and the hacker-centric curriculum that I feel like I've developed at Columbia over the course of teaching Rails for 3 semesters. So I'll talk about teaching Rails at Columbia, sort of my story to put everything in context. Then this hacker-centric curriculum, what it is, why I developed it, and what it actually focuses on. And then what you can do as hackers, because presumably, who here has studied Rails in an academic institution? Who taught themselves Rails? Okay, so what you can do as hackers to give back to the community, because we don't only have to contribute code, we can contribute knowledge and education as well. Before I get started on talking about this hacker-centric curriculum, I want to point out that the term hacker is a shibboleth, which sounds very close to gibberish, but it's a term that's overloaded. It's both used positively and negatively, but I really want to use it in its positive sense here. The main definition of hacker that I'm interested in is something that I think Mark Zuckerberg described quite nicely in the code.org sort of inspirational video on why coding should be taught in schools and to children at a very early age. He said that as a hacker, as someone interested in technology, he had a goal in mind, something he wanted to build, and then went and looked up things along the way to accomplish his goal. So he wasn't interested in learning all of computer science all at once. He was interested in getting to a goal and looking up information and tools when he was blocked. So this is the kind of hacker I'm talking about here, the resourceful, curious hacker in a positive sense. So talking about myself, I have both a traditional and untraditional background. As I said, I work on the Ruby driver team at 10gen. I work on the Ruby driver to MongoDB. We're a team of about 3 or 4 people. Before that, I worked for a startup in New York City that sells limited edition artworks online. It's called 20 by 200 as a full stack hacker. So I was running Perl, embarrassingly, Ruby on Rails, 2 different versions, running server scripts, etc. You all know what I'm talking about. Before that, I did a master's at the Louvre Museum. It was a 2-year program, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. I worked at IBM as a business consultant, and I studied computer science and art history at Columbia. I double majored. So why am I telling you all of this? Why am I listing out my resume? I'm actually a pretty serious engineer at 10gen. This is the Ruby team. We're very serious about our engineering. But what I really want to get at is that I feel like I have a pretty unique perspective because I went to Columbia, as I said, as an undergrad. Then I worked for a few years, and I was sort of meandering around doing things pretty much related to technology. And then now as a professional, I'm going back and teaching students, among which I was not too long ago. So I think it's also it's impossible to give a talk about education and not at least mention Why the Lucky Stiff, who was, I'm sure most of you know who Why the Lucky Stiff is. He was pretty active between 2006 and 2009 as a big advocate in the Ruby community, specifically for getting people to learn how to code using Ruby Ruby specifically because it was so easy to use and expressive and as close to natural language as you can get in terms of programming languages. And he gave a talk in 2009 at Carnegie Mellon at a symposium called Art and Code, where he said that the key to getting people, more people interested in coding was really to have these hybrid programmer teachers, because teachers don't necessarily right now have the skills or experience to build things along with their students and show them practical coding skills. So we really need programmers coming in as educators or educators who are then educated on how to teach programming. Or you just need crazy programmers. So I don't know if I'm crazy, but I agree with why. I think that academia and hacking should not be mutually exclusive. So I said I wanted to show you what I did at the Louvre just to give some context here, and I guess in telling this story, I guess my observations later on will make a little more sense. So I was doing this 2-year master's program at the Louvre. The first year was mostly museum studies. It was sort of like a business school where we learned about budgeting and moving large artworks around. The second year I was really missing technology, so I did my master's thesis working full-time in the conservation department to develop a Ruby on Rails application that allowed materials scientists there to log samplings that they had taken from artworks. There was a system already in place using Ruby on Rails that had metadata and historical data on artworks, and I was building this other Ruby on Rails system that was more for scientific data and then able to link data on samples after analyses had been run back to historical and metadata about artwork, so that a scientist's research could facilitate a curator's historical understanding of an artwork. So the point of me mentioning this is that when I went to do this project, I went to talk to the woman who was the head of the technologies department. She proposed this project to me, and I was like, yeah, I have a CS degree. It sounds great. Ruby on Rails. Never heard of it before. I had no idea what it was. My roadmap was completely blank. I was like, had no idea what I was getting myself into. But all of us, well, most of us have taught ourselves Rails. So we know that there are a number of resources that allow you to learn Rails. And a few things in particular allow me to be successful that I identified afterwards in reflecting on this experience. One was this existing Rails app that I used as an example, and I would mimic some strategies and data modeling, et cetera. It was extremely useful for building my own app. The second thing was the internet, and this might seem totally obvious to you, but it was not obvious to my students when I started teaching at Columbia, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Trying things out. So this goes along with what Mark Zuckerberg was saying, that I had a goal in mind. I had no idea how I was going to get there. I didn't have a roadmap. But as soon as I got stuck, I would look something up and get there step by step. Books are not obsolete. Colleagues, so just talking to people in the technology lab, talking to them about the system they had built, their experience was extremely valuable. And communities, so going beyond just the technology lab, talking to people in schools. I was reaching out to people I'd studied with at Columbia. This was also extremely valuable. And users, this is an interesting one. So I keep saying I have a CS degree, but I never had to think about building a tool for a real person in school, or think about, like, you would study theory and then practice, and then theory and practice. But this sense of thinking about a user and user interfaces, how to build a tool that is really organized and allows someone to really accomplish something. This was, I learned a lot from this project because I worked very closely with about 30 research scientists, and they, with me, developed this system in a very agile way. So we iterated on ideas and features. So this was extremely useful for the work that I then did afterwards. And it's worth mentioning also that I was in Paris, which is not known to have a super thriving tech scene. At the time especially, it was pretty difficult. I didn't know anything about meetups. There was really no community physically that I could have gone and interacted with. And I guess this experience makes me appreciate even more the resources that I'm from New York, so that we specifically have in New York, but I'm sure a lot of other cities in the US have great resources as well. So my whole point of explaining this is to tell you that I feel like this experience in particular is what prepared me best for the job that I then took in New York as a full stack hacker. Specifically, there's my first foray into running cron jobs was this one functionality on our site where every Friday at 8 a.m. we had a flash sale on a couple of artworks where the price would be reduced by 20%. So I first wrote this script that would run at 8 a.m. on Friday and use a callback on a model to go through and see if it was flagged for price reduction. So it runs, I check it, I get up early, and I check it at 8:03, it looks great, go to work. A couple of hours later, I get an IM from a colleague, and she says, "Why is this artwork 30 cents? So essentially, I was messing up something about saving after create, or calling the callback after create versus save, something like that. I don't remember right now, but being able to accept that I had made a mistake and react really quickly is definitely something that I learned while working at the Louvre and making a lot of mistakes. So now, back to the present. So I'm working at Tengen. I started teaching the Rails class while I was still a web developer at this art company. And when I first taught the class, I thought I was going to be teaching Rails. But as I taught the class, I realized that there's so much knowledge I've learned on the job in my couple of years working professionally as a developer that I really wanted to share with the students. And so it's sort of like give them a fishing pole instead of a fish type thing. And those assumptions that I had made about just teaching Rails were totally false. And I had to, as any agile developer, revamp my curriculum now. I'm in the third semester, and I feel like I've gotten to a pretty good place where, I guess to describe the course in itself, I do teach Rails. All of the classes involve Rails, but all of the assignments or the activities I have students do, I really focus on having them develop a certain behavior or highlight something that I feel like is a skill that you only really get from working in the real world. So I've revamped this curriculum, and I think this semester I've had the most fun teaching the class. I think the students have gotten a lot out of it. My last class is on Monday, so I'm looking forward to getting my evaluations and seeing what they thought of it. But this class is rare, and not only at Columbia. So it's half semester at Columbia. It's only 6 weeks. I'm not sure I could teach it for the whole semester, just because it's so time-consuming. But just to get an idea of what other colleges were teaching, and I guess before when I asked the audience who had taught themselves Rails, most of you had taught yourselves Rails. So I wanted to look at some other universities to see if maybe I'm totally wrong and other universities do expose students to web development or Rails and Rails. And I looked at some of the better ranked computer science departments in the country. I don't want to name them to point fingers, but because for the most part their CS programs are very strong. But very, very few universities are even teaching web development, not even Rails. I understand Rails is like a specific framework, and maybe they don't have the resources to bring in a particular person who knows Rails, but even web development is largely absent from academia. But you might ask yourself, is web development, is Rails relevant to a CS program in a top university, or any university really? Is it something that we should be learning in the community because it's so organic, it's open source, we come to conferences like this and we learn from each other? I think the foundations of computer science are essential. I don't think that we should be replacing university curricula with trade school curricula. I don't think that academia should change along with each trend in the tech industry, particularly because a generation in tech is so short. DHH said in his keynote the other day that he developed Rails 10 years ago when we were all using flip phones. And that feels like an eon ago. It feels like another era. And it would be impossible for academia to revamp its curriculum, introduce new professors, new research, new classes, and expose their students to all these new subjects just based on industry trends. So I don't think it's a very easy problem to solve, but I think there are some things that we can do and that I can do even at Columbia. I couldn't change, when I realized this, I couldn't change everything. I couldn't change the curriculum at Columbia. I couldn't change the core courses you had to take to get a CS degree from Columbia. But what I could change was my class. So I tried to highlight in one of my first classes to my students that I see Rails as the gateway drug to web development. I try to focus on thinking about what I learned as an undergrad and what they're learning now and map some of those concepts to Ruby on Rails. And for one, I think framing everything in an object-oriented way is some of the best ways of mapping Rails concepts to what they know already. So they have a class on databases, they have a class on networking, they have a class on just various other theoretical concepts of computer science. And I try to extract those and show them examples in Rails of how that works in the whole context of a web framework. In particular, I think this is really important because it allows them to take the theory that they learn and see it in practice and give them a little bit more of a hacker mindset where they can teach themselves and run with that theory. In particular, because in the job market, a couple of examples of job titles, specifically in New York, that even use the word hacker. At Tengen specifically, on our careers page, we say we have a hacker culture, so we're looking for hackers, among other jobs, of course. Etsy even has a job title called office hacker, who is someone, in the job description it says it's someone who is able to take gadgets and tinker with them and make the office environment more productive and facilitate communication, et cetera. They also have another job title called intrinsically motivated full stack product hacker, who is someone who takes the masses of data that they have in existence and finds a way of running analytics on them and presenting them to maybe business decision makers, or basically someone who can take a bunch of data that's unstructured or has really no value and add some analytics on top of it. So if that doesn't prove that some major tech companies are looking for hackers, I'm not sure what would. So I had all these ideas. Specifically this last semester, I've been thinking a lot about this in trying to get some of those behaviors into my curriculum. And I realized that maybe I'm just completely crazy. Maybe the students are learning these skills, and I just think that my experience is exactly like what everybody else is experiencing now. So I used this tool called Poll Everywhere, which is a way that you can poll a group of people and have them text or use a browser to send an anonymous response to your question. So at my last class, I had a sort of all-hands-on-deck class where I bribed them to come because I had cookies and milk, and they all came. They're all excited to talk to me about this presentation I was going to make and answer the questions that I told them I would have for them. And I asked them 5 questions, and I'm going to share some of the responses with you because I think they're pretty useful for showing, I guess, proving what I'm saying, providing some numbers behind some of these observations I made. So the first question I asked them was, is this class different from other classes you've taken at Columbia? And if so, how? 97% said yes. Actually, let me just say there are about 40 people who came to class. 50 enrolled, but some don't always come to class. So 97% said yes. And when I asked them why, some of the words that came up were modern, practical, more creative, solving our own problems, less focused on grading, but probably because I'm lazy. I think they felt like they had more autonomy and they could really create something themselves, be creative. They weren't sort of confined to a box or a problem set. So that sort of proved to me that at least I'm getting somewhere. At least I'm exposing them to something different. The second question I asked was, if you've had an internship, do you feel you had all the necessary skills or that you are lacking in a particular area? So this is one response from that question. And I guess the point of me showing you this quote is that this one student lists a myriad of languages that they have to deal with. And they said there was a lot to take in, they learned a lot, but they really wish that they had some preparation either in any one of those languages or to deal with them all at once. So thinking about the full stack is something that I particularly like to teach in my class. 96% said yes to this question, that they felt like they had an internship for which they were not prepared by their curriculum at Columbia. And then they said in particular they felt like they were unprepared for collaborating, version controls, not taught in any class, learning from others, APIs, Unix, you're exposed very little to Unix, semantic versioning, nobody knew what that was when I explained it in class, running clean codes, this idea of, I went to the Go talk 2 days ago, and the speaker talked about writing idiomatic code, and I had to explain what writing idiomatic code was to the students, because I think that we know how to write idiomatic code by looking at others' codes for the most part and participating in some kind of community, having a community interaction. And if that's absent, sometimes you don't really know if what you're writing is idiomatic for your language. So that was question number 2. Number 3, I asked them, do you participate in hackathons? The reason I asked this question was because I thought maybe I had gotten a sampling in my class of students who just weren't even exposed to hacking at all or never went to hackathons, didn't really know what it was. But 50% said they had gone to hackathons. So I'm not exactly sure what to conclude from this, and I'm guessing that maybe it's because they go to hackathons as a social thing with their friends, and they don't really think beyond the one project, the one-off hackathon that they do. Maybe there's, I'm not sure if, maybe in a hackathon, as I said, maybe it's the free food or something, I don't really know. But I guess for me, that proved that, okay, good, they are exposed to hacking, they are exposed to working with other people, so we have to take it one step further. The fourth question was, have you used open source software before this class? And most of them said yes, actually. So I asked this question pretty much for the same reason I asked the hackathon question. I wanted to see if maybe I'd gotten a sampling of students who weren't exposed to open source software, didn't know about communicating with others or exploring other projects online, contributing to open source. So the fact that they are exposed to open source, I think, is great, a step in the right direction. But I think maybe we need to take it one step further. I'm not exactly sure what to extract from this statistic, but I think it was good to know anyway that they do know what open source software is. And then the last question was, I asked them if they had a GitHub account before the class, because I had them use Git, obviously, for submitting homework. And 90% said yes, they had a GitHub account before the class. But most of them said that they had it for a hackathon or a personal project. One of my students last week was telling me that he was really excited that he was applying to an internship over the summer that required Ruby on Rails knowledge, and he was really excited that he was in a Ruby on Rails class, he had it on his resume, and that he was going to submit them a zip file of their source code, of his source code that evening of his Rails app. And I was like, please use GitHub. So that showed me that I guess I'm using GitHub in class, but I think I need to go a little bit further with that as well and say it's pretty much the standard for how people share code now. So anyway, that was just sort of my own thing that I wanted to get the class's perspective and just make sure that my observations and my conclusions or the way I was thinking about how to develop the curriculum wasn't completely off. And I think through these numbers, I think I'm pretty much on the right track. So my point for you, back to now, back to you, back to this conference, as open source contributors, I think we can contribute more than just code. We can contribute knowledge and education because there are holes in academia, in academic computer science curriculum specifically. So I want to go over 5 specific hacker habits and how I tried to teach them in my class to give you some concrete examples of some of the strategies I've taken. This is just a curated list of 5 of them that I defined and I have examples for. Of course, there are other things in class that I try to teach as well. But I just want to share some of them because I think they're sort of interesting. So the first one, I'm hoping the Wi-Fi will work for this. But first day of class, yes, okay. This is, let me Google it for you. Let me Google that for you. I use MongoDB, obviously, for my class. And so you have to skip active record, right, when you install Rails. And so I tell my class on the first day that I will not respond to an email if I can Google your question and find the answer on the first page of Google results. You really need to use the internet as your primary resource. And inevitably, a week before the class starts, I always get a couple of emails from students, more than you'd think, asking me what the textbook is. There's no textbook listed on the course site. And I always say the internet is your textbook. It's your primary resource. And if they want to know some books, I'll recommend some books as well, because books are, of course, useful. So that's the first thing. I really emphasize using the internet, looking things up on Stack Overflow, and having it be really the first place you go to when you're stuck. Second thing, ability to debug code you didn't write. So I do this every single day in my job. I did not write the Ruby driver. I maintain the Ruby driver. This means I need to reverse engineer the Ruby driver. I need to debug. I need to add features. So this skill, I in particular try to teach by their authentication homework. I set up a skeleton app on GitHub with authentication in it. And I said, here's this app. Look at the authentication elements and put it into your own app. And I added a couple of bugs. So they were all like, oh, great, we get code from the teacher, and of course left it to the last minute. I hold my office hours on Sunday afternoons, classes on Monday. My office hours have never been busier. I'd say at least 3 times the number of students who normally come to office hours were there. I think because having to look at code and getting frustrated, knowing where to go when you find an error is definitely a skill that they might not have been exposed to. The third thing is build something to solve a real-life problem. So this is the first semester I'm sort of doing something like this, or really pushing it. My course site is on Google Sites, which is really embarrassing because it's a Rails class. So I decided that this semester I wanted to have my class be structured almost like a hackathon and have the students build a tool for me, for them in theory, that I would use next semester. So I'm having them build a Rails app that allows me to post homework assignments, the presentations that I use in class, and has a discussion forum for them. And I think there's a little bit of a friendly competition amongst the students to make the best app, because I said that whichever one is the strongest, I'll work with the student to deploy it on Heroku and then use it next semester. So I think this sort of practical, I said before that when I was at the Louvre, it was like the first time I had to think about users using a system that I had created or that I was in the process of creating. And I think this sort of mentality for them, getting them to think about me and them and using this tool is a really important skill to learn, especially in a web development class. And then the fourth thing, engage with the community. So I mean this in 2 ways. The first way, so engage with the community in person and through code. So in person, in their first homework assignment, I have them sign up for a meetup, and they add it to their README and push it up to GitHub, sort of as a first GitHub commit. And I'm really going for awareness here. I don't check to make sure they actually go to their meetup. I don't really care. But I realized that I do actually need to check what meetup they signed up for, because a lot of them signed up for beer enthusiasts. I was like, guys, this is not the point. But anyway, there's the awareness now, which is great. That's what I was going for. I can't go through 50 READMEs and make sure that they chose relevant meetups. But some of them make the most of, they have a lot of office hours meetups for students to meet each other. I think it's been really great. And then the second thing is engaging with the community through code. So their final homework assignment, or their final project really, which is a 3-week-long thing, part of it is to do a pull request on someone else's app and add something pretty simple like validation to a model. But I really want to get them used to, I'm going to explain in their last class on Monday, sort of the pull request etiquette and what that means, so that hopefully they'll get excited by this and potentially write their own open source projects or contribute to open source projects that are out there. So that's engage with the community. So be aware of other users out there and how you can share code with them. And then the last one I want to talk about is thinking critically about code. So this is what I like to call the leave a penny, take a penny mindset. So it's this idea of contributing code either on Stack Overflow, but then also using code from Stack Overflow and thinking about it, not just plopping into your app and trusting that it works. So the way I try to teach this in particular is I encourage, So the reason I need to highlight this really at Columbia is because the students are a little bit afraid of using the internet for content that they would potentially submit as part of an assignment, because Columbia is so aggressive with their anti-plagiarism policy, which makes total sense. I'm not saying that that shouldn't be the case. But getting them used to the fact that you can go to Stack Overflow, take code from Stack Overflow, use it in your app, but take responsibility for that code as well. So they had to do a homework assignment where they had to write a rake task to import data, and I didn't tell them how to do it. I just said use this particular method of parsing the data. I gave them a CSV file. And if any of them asked them, like, okay, where do I start? I said, look it up on Stack Overflow. Go look at an example. And then, but then, of course, like if it doesn't work because the code they took from Stack Overflow doesn't work, then it's their responsibility. I'm not gonna like not take points off because they copied bad code. So it's just getting used to. The other thing is using Ruby gems. So I encourage them to check out gems, and if they're interested in adding some features into their apps, I have a lot of extra credit so that the students who might be a little more advanced have something to look forward to. So I explained Ruby gems and how you can look at a gem that might have similar functionality to another gem, and how you cross-reference with GitHub, see when the last commit was, and how many downloads it has, and sort of that thinking critically about code skill that all of us do pretty much every day. So those are 5 hacker habits, just sort of a sampling of things that I like to highlight in my class. And again, these are like behaviors that I try to teach through assignments, but the actual class I'm teaching is Rails. So I go through all the specifics of Rails and conventions and et cetera. So the number of opportunities in tech is growing. According to the US Department of Labor, the number of jobs in computer programming will be 1.4 million in 2020, and universities are only prepared to fill 30% of those jobs. And according to code.org, the number of computer jobs is growing at 2 times the national average. So it's really important that we are focusing on getting more people involved in computer science, teaching more programming, either in academia or in the community, and making sure that we're touching on relevant skills, because they're in such high demand. We need to bring hacking to academia and academia to hacking. So that's sort of my overall message of this talk. I really think that they should not exist isolated from each other. They should really mutually inform each other. So what can you do as a hacker? What can you do to get involved and share your knowledge? Luckily, there are so many opportunities now to teach programming, whether it's in a high school, in a community, in academia. In particular, Skillshare is really popular in New York. I'm not sure about other cities, but with Skillshare, you can have both an online course as well as a course in person, an ongoing course, or just a one-off, one night for 2 hours thing. And you can make money doing it. General Assembly is really popular in New York as well. They offer immersion programs. So you can spend 8 weeks learning how to code. So you can teach these classes as well as workshops, which are just a couple of hours over the weekend, or classes that meet a couple of times per week, once or twice a week for a couple of weeks. And you can get involved in this. It's also great for networking with people because specifically in New York, I'm not sure about other cities, General Assembly tends to attract a lot of entrepreneurial-minded people. So if you're interested in starting a company, it's one of the best ways to gain exposure to other people who are interested maybe in the same things as you are. YouTube, I put this on here because when I was watching Y's presentation at the Art and Code Symposium, he makes reference to a 10-year-old who's teaching C++ through a YouTube channel, and if he can do it, you can do it. There's TEALS, which is a program that New York is implementing in the fall for the first time. It stands for Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools. And what it is a program where professionals in programming can stop by a high school for an hour, I think it's once a week, and you have a TA, and teach programming to high schoolers. So I think this type of program is really awesome if you have just a couple of extra hours per week. And it means so much to high schools as well as the students in high school. Hackety Hack Lessons, this is a GitHub repo, just as an example. It's something Y started, a project that specifically focuses on teaching programming to young people. You can add lessons to this. It's still a live project, even though Y has fallen out of, he's shut down his public presence. Podcasts, of course, verbal blogs. Rails Girls, who got the Ruby Hero Award this year, they have excellent workshops around the world, and you can get involved with those. They often coordinate them with conferences, so I know, in particular, Ruby Nation will have a Rails Girls workshop the day before, and you can volunteer to get involved in that, so you can sort of piggyback on maybe a trip that you would already be making with some opportunities to teach. So for you, there are many benefits. I mentioned that General Assembly, if you're teaching there, it's a great networking opportunity. Your potential colleagues will be better prepared. So this means your managers, your interns, your peers at work. So if you help fill in the holes in academic education, or just really help people who are trying to teach themselves Rails or anything really, web development, you will help them just as if you, when you were learning, you were looking for help as well. You can fill in the holes. No better way to reinforce your knowledge. So I thought I knew Rails, but then I tried to teach Rails. I still spend entire weekends before my class relearning Rails, or just really looking at the source code and making sure that I'm like really prepared to answer questions. It's like really great way to reinforce your own knowledge. And strengthen your profile. I mean, people really love to see that you're active in the community. As I said, you don't only have to contribute code, you can also contribute knowledge and education, build your network, and of course, karma. So what I'm really advocating for is this thing called hackademia. I really think that hacking and academia should be integrated. Thank you.